Hey everybody, I'm the Bat Otter, and I want to tell you guys a story. And this story very much pertains to the video, but it's a story about how I got filthy stinking rich. Now, are you hooked? Are you entertained? Because that's exactly what this chapter of Jojolands is about. The very opening chapter, we get so much information about this kid named Joe Dio, one of the strangest names you're ever going to hear, getting filthy rich in the Pacific Islands, more specifically, Hawaii. Now, Araki has started the last three parts of his series, whether that be Steel Ball Run or Jojolian, with exactly what you're gonna get. I believe Steel Ball Run started with this is a story about me learning how to walk. That was from Johnny's perspective. Jojolian was a story about a family breaking a curse. This one is about a kid getting stinking rich. I'm all in. First of all, I just got to tell you guys that I'm all into the story just from that. And if you think that that opening couldn't get any bigger, any more wild, any more bizarre, because that's so much more of a selfish reason than we've ever gotten with any of these JoJo characters. We've gotten Johnny. I mean, he wanted to learn how to walk, but who wouldn't want to be able to walk? You know what I mean? So the other one, a family breaking a curse, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a curse. Curses are negative. You want something positive. This kid getting rich, I mean, that's one of the more selfish goals for a JoJo character. Jolene wanted to break out of prison. Jotaro wanted to save his mother. We've never gotten such a self-fulfilling goal. So I think already that's a very interesting start to this part. And as the chapter continues, I believe it's 60 or almost 70 pages long, it gives us a lot of information and a lot of interesting information to really scratch our chins about. Now it opens with Jodio and his brother, his older brother, Dragona, being pulled over by some police officers. Now this is a very interesting part because Araki has a tendency of revealing very odd and maybe even personal, maybe some would consider too much information about characters in very odd fashions, right? This is no different than that because Dragona is in a women's two-piece swimsuit. Jodio is dressed like he's dressed on the cover. He has the earring, he has the little star in his hair, he has the hoodie, and he's very quiet. He doesn't talk very much. His sister, presumably his sister, is talking for him. She's the one driving. So she gives the police officer her ID. She does some stand fiddling around with it. They're laughing about how she was bopping too hard to Dua Lipa until the officer starts to harass her, tells her to get out of the car. And this is when the very bizarre things start to happen. Officer pushes her against the car, spreads her legs, and starts feeling her up. Now, this is already very weird if as we don't know what's going to happen, and he starts putting his hands in her pants, more specifically her crotch. And we get a very interesting piece of information revealed from this, both about Dragona and about this police officer. And I have this on my phone. The reason that I'm not reviewing it with the chapter up is because last time I did that with Jojolian, it got taken down. I'm not sure how Xforts and maybe Hamonbeat get away with putting the pictures straight on the screen because I know that even Comic Storian has had trouble doing kind of the motion comic sort of deal with manga. So I don't know how they do it. I'm not taking that chance again. Shueisha themselves sent a hitman after me. I'm not dealing with that again. Uh, so like I said, the police officer puts his hands down into her crotch and st- he starts to sweat. He's like, "What? What?" He's looking at her ID, and this is verbatim what it says in the chapter. He says, "Oh man." He has this sweaty face, this very gross-looking face. He says, "That makes me even more turned on." Dragona is on top a female, dresses female, but is naturally a male. Now, this has been a point of contention for a lot of people recently as they're not totally sure what to make of it. it could be a transgender situation. Now, to me, I think people are overthinking it, and I think that's a general rule of thumb for me, and a lot of the kind of transgender things in general. I think it's a lot of overthinking being done for it because the way that Araki in the past has handled androgyny and the way that he handles his characters, and I guess you could say sexuality in general, is he handles it by not handling it. So the translators have given us uh, Dragona being referred to as a male. That's what Jodio calls him. Uh, that's what all the other characters call him. Uh, to be quite honest, I don't think it really matters. I think that as Araki builds characters, the aspects of a character and even the aspects of androgyny of a character play into their stand, play into the story much more than just the surface level of he or she or they or them or whatever, what have you. So I'm going to refer to Dragona as a guy. That's what Jodio calls her, just to get that out of the way. And what you might find interesting about that is it plays into the story almost immediately. The idea that Dragona is both a man and a woman is an androgynous character because his stand rearranges things. It's these little mechanisms. You guys ever have construction toys when you were a kid, and they're not even the size of pencil erasers. Some of them, the pink pencil erasers. That's what his stand is. It's these little guys, and they just move things around and reshape things and change. And I'm like, that is so specific because, as Jodio says, he gets injections in his chest to make it look like he has female breasts, and that's kind of the story behind that. So Jodio gets out of the car. Let me stop dwelling, and doesn't say anything. He shows off his drip and he says, get your hands off my big bro right now." He brings out his stand, and his stand is one of the more interesting stands that we've seen. It is a quadruped with a little cone coming down the middle. It has a very JoJo-esque face, looks like a palm tree almost, and it sends raindrops that crush the police officers. He's a very no nonsense kind of guy. Dragona then puts his hand over the police officer's face, rearranging his face, looking like a Picasso painting. And they body these guys as Jodio lashes out and starts stomping them out while Dragona pulls them off of the police officer, saying, "Calm down, like it's not that big a deal." Jodio goes to the police car, he lights it up, blows it up. They go on, and just when you think it can't get any crazier, they go deliver a couple of bricks of cocaine to the local dealers, and they make a trade. They then explain mechanisms. They explain their mother and how she has her whole day, her whole routine, and that everybody does everything for the mother. So you might think they just blew up a police car. They just took down these cops. Granted, these cops were kind of jerks. Kind of jerks. That's underselling it. These guys were a bunch of jerks, bad people. So it kind of all justifies itself almost in a way, to make the characters not seem terrible. They're still the main guys that we have to root for. And all of this drug dealing, all of this criminal activity that they're doing so that way their mother can be well respected in the community, can be served so that way she could live a quiet life like Yoshikage Kira always wanted. And in doing so, they have to gain the respect of the community by taking nothing from nobody, by providing things, by not asking questions, and by getting things done on time and the right way. Jodio then goes on to explain that there's another kid in his school that has everything but is not respected. He's tripped. People throw food at him. People don't respect him. People push him around. They bully him. Even though, for all intents and purposes, he should be just like anybody else, they don't respect him. But they respect Joe Dio and the Joestar family there because of their actions outside of school. He keeps on explaining these mechanisms. And as the story goes on, there's a lot of exposition that's probably important that I'm going to go over. We have this really sick shot of the kid getting bullied, and Jodio says, but he ends up like that, and he's on the floor getting bullied. Meanwhile, Jodio, he's striking these killer poses, and he says, meanwhile, I'm like this, and he's got a bunch of ladies around him, and sometimes more like this, and he's still got a bunch of ladies around him. The guy's absolute mad lad, going on explaining all these different things. Seems like a very intelligent character, and he talks about he wants to get rich no matter what it takes, right? And they then go on to introduce a whole set of characters that they're going to use. And you might think, well, why are they setting up all these characters? This guy has a stand. His stand manipulates his muscles so he can pickpocket people just by touching them. He doesn't even have to grab them. His muscles grab the. It's a weird stand. It's very odd to explain. He part of his ear is missing, kind of like Mike Tyson. I think his dad is Mike Tyson. Took a bit out of his ear. Took a bite. Excuse me. And we learn that the principal, who is modeled after the Dutch painting. You guys know that Dutch painting, the portrait of the blonde lady with the little rag around her hair. She has that pony. You guys know what I'm talking about. You're classically trained artists. She gets them all together. She introduces Hot Dog Guy, and she says, "Hey, listen, guys. There's this guy. He's got a big old diamond. Big old diamond. He's single. He's coming to an estate here from Japan, and you guys are gonna have a very small window of opportunity to break into homie's house and take his diamond." And that's the setup to the story and what comes later. Now, there's plenty of speculation. Who is this guy? Is it Gappy? Is it Josuke? Is it Joshu? Is it any one of the Higashikata family members? We have reason to believe that it's a very, very powerful individual because as they go over the heist plan, as they go over everything, he says, "You're going to need 4 for your team." But as Jodio puts it, this is only the beginning. The boss did call one thing correctly, he says, as the boss said they're going to need more than just 3 people. Just 3 of us would seriously not have been enough. Actually, it wouldn't have been enough no matter how many people we had. And that's how the chapter ends. It shows off the stands of each of the characters that has been established. It obviously shouts out the next part, but that's the chapter. Now, what I found very interesting is JoJo stories don't get set up this fast, typically. Usually they're drawn out over the first handful of chapters. You don't get a lot of information. The information is fed to you throughout the part. But here's the thing, and I wanted to touch on this in this video. I'm gonna try not to make this too long, but I wanted to touch on this, and that is Araki is 60 years old. Now, plenty of people live well into their 80s. I mean, plenty less live well into their 90s, and plenty more live well into their 70s. So I don't think that this is an issue of how much longer does Araki have. He could live well into his 80s and be fine. But the question is more like, past the age of 60, anybody at any point could die for anything. And Araki's not dumb. He wrote 9 parts of JoJo. He knows that. He's had this part established all the way back whenever he was writing Still Ball Run. I feel like this could very well be the contender for the last part of JoJo as a series. And the reason that Araki is shoving all this information and all of these story beats into this very first chapter, even the family tree, which I didn't go over because that stuff is way too specific, I think he knows that it's a bit of a gamble to run this story for 10 more years. I think he knows that even if he does live well into his 70s, even if he does live well into his 80s, it's how long do I want to be writing these things and what obligation do I have to the fans to finish my work and not leave them hanging? Because look at what happened to the late great Kentaro Miura, right? Died, I believe, at the age of 58, 59. Look at what just happened to Kim Jong-gi. He was only 47. He had decades of work past him. So I think Araki is setting us up for some grand finale of JoJo, and this is going to be one of the most densely packed parts we've ever gotten from JoJo. Just from this beginning, it introduces 4 main characters. It introduces an entire system, just like you had Spin in Steel Ball Run, just like you had Fate and what is it? I want to say Causality because that's what it is in Berserk. But you had Calamity in Part 8. This new one is Mechanisms, and I kind of see where he's coming from. A clock, you look at a clock and you see all the gears moving very, very randomly, but then you see what they actually make, and it's the clock ticking and moving and telling time. So I think that's what he's getting at with these mechanisms. And to pack so much of this stuff into the story, I think we're going to have one of the most detailed and interesting JoJo parts that we've gotten so far. Because there's always room for growth in JoJo. There's always room for new characters. There's always room for new twists and more bizarre happenings, just like we got in the very opening moments of this chapter. And I'm very interested to see. And I hope that we get a good part. Because this might be it. This might be it. And I find that very intriguing. Because whenever you get into a late style of an artist's career, you get a lot of self reference. We've seen that with Steel Ball Run, we've seen that with Jojolian, and we've seen that even with the way that he titles them as Jojolian and Jojolands. Never done that before. I think it's going to be a very interesting bit of chapters. I'm very excited for the next one. I very thoroughly enjoyed this. I like the character designs. They're very interesting as usual. I think that my palette has changed a bit since I first started reading JoJo, and not all of the bizarre nature of the series and the more unorthodox art style. It doesn't suit me as well. I'm not necessarily growing with Araki in that regard, but I want to stick it out. I want to see what happens, and I want to see what he does because these covers are getting better and better. The stories are getting more and more interesting. Some might say convoluted, but I definitely want to see what happens. So that's been the video. It was a bit of a long one because I can keep on droning and droning on. There were a lot of interesting things to cover in this, but like I said, ultimately, I want to see where it goes. So that's it, guys. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Tell me if you like this format of video. Again, if I could show you guys what I'm talking about, I would. Unfortunately, don't want to take that chance. Aside from that, subscribe, like, check out my short story in the description below titled The Pigeon Queen on Gumroad. No sign up required, only $5, 8 pages of writing, 2 pages of artwork, and be sure to follow me on Instagram. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.